You're listening to the weekly Parsha podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Israel, 5777, 2017. This week's Parsha is Parshas Behaaloscha. I want to remind you about my sefer, my book, Perfectly Imperfect, which is available wherever fine Jewish literature is sold. I'd like to share with you some thoughts about our Parsha that has to do with the Menorah, the candelabra inside of the tabernacle. I'd like to share with you a few different ideas, a few different ways that the Midrashim approach the idea of the Neros, of the light, and how that manifested in the world. It's very interesting. Some of these ideas seem to be unconnected, but they are Midrashim that follow each other. There are four different pieces I'd like to read with you, and we'll see that there's a thread or there's an idea that we can bring out of all four of these. So I'd like to start with the first one. This is in Parsha Tezvav, in section 15, subsection 9, number Tes. Amar Yisrael, the Jewish people said, Shlach orcha v'amitcha hema yanchuni. It's a verse in Psalm chapter 43, verse 3. It says, the Jewish people are asking of God, please send your light and your truth, and let them guide me. Now, we need to understand that what we're speaking about here, in the context of the tabernacle, we speak about the candelabra, the light. Hashem does not need light. We're speaking about the relationship that we have with Hashem and all the things that we do in that relationship, lighting these candles, bringing these sacrifices, all have to do with something that we are expressing in our relationship with Hashem. So what is the idea of this light? What is the idea of the light of the menorah, of the candelabra? What is the idea of the light that we're asking of God to guide us with? So Medrash says like this, Gadol oirei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Great is the light of Hashem. Hachama v'halavona mi'irim la'olam. We find that the sun and the moon, they give light to the world. Umehechan heim me'irim. What gives them light? What shines into them? Or how do they have that light? Where does that light come from? Mizikuke or shel ma'alon hin chayfin. They have sparks of light which come from above. That's where their light comes from. Shneimar, as the verse says in Chavakuk, chapter 3, verse 11, Le'or chitzecha yahalechu. To the light of your arrows they go. L'noige barak chanisecha. By the glow of your spears of lightning. We see that the light which is shining into the world, which is giving life to the world, which is giving warmth to the world, the root of that, the source of that, is God's light, God's glow, as it were. Gadol ha'or shel malon. The Medrash continues and explains, great is the light of above, shelo nitam mimenu lekol habriyos, ela echad mimeya. When it comes to being able to be a transmitter of Hashem's light, not everyone has access to it. Not everyone has the ability to transmit that light. Only 1 in 100. Shneimar, as the verse says in Daniel, chapter 2, verse 22, Yada ma b'chashoicha. There is knowledge of that which is in the darkness. So the word ma, as the Eitz Yosef explains, we find that our Chazal take the word ma, which means what, or that which, and the word ma can also be read as mea, which means 100. So there are those who are able to see through the darkness, to understand that which is hidden by the darkness. But those people are 1 in 100. Now the Medrash continues and explains that since the light, the spiritual light which we're speaking of, is only accessible to yechidim, to individuals, lefichach asisi chama u'levana sheyairu lefanecha. Therefore, I placed the sun and the moon, that they are that which shall light the way before you. Shneimar, as the verse says, God placed them in the heavens in order that they should give light. So in listening and trying to understand, what is this Medrash trying to teach us? What is the idea behind the Medrash? What does it mean that the sun and the moon, they somehow give spiritual guidance to the world? It seems like we're not just talking about sustenance here. The Medrash started off speaking about Shlach orcha v'amitcha hema yanchuni. It's speaking about the light of Hashem, which guides us, which shows us our path in life. And yet, there are only 1 in 100, as the Medrash is saying, who actually can access the light of Hashem directly and understand that. Maybe great tzaddikim, maybe people who are on a very high spiritual level. But for the average person, for the other 99 out of 100 people, the Medrash is telling us that that light of guidance comes somehow through the sun and the moon. So what is that idea? What is the depth of what this Medrash is speaking about? And I believe that what the Medrash is trying to show, or what the idea of the Medrash is that the sun and the moon, it's not just speaking about the celestial bodies themselves, but it's speaking about the cycles. The sun has a cycle. It has a 365-day and a quarter day, which is the cycle of the sun. We have those 4 seasons, and we go through these times where there's more plenty, there's more bounty. In the spring, we have all of the developments of the spring. In the winter, all the developments go into hibernation, go underground, so to speak. We have that aspect that goes on. We have the cycles of the moon, all of those things that are built into the Jewish calendar, which represent and also correspond to that which is going on in the solar calendar, in the process of the months. So each and every individual, we experience those things that are represented by the sun and the moon, the cycle of the sun and the moon, the cycle of the lunar year, the solar year. We also experience that to a certain level in our personal lives. So Hashem brings the shefa, He brings the influx into our lives in a parallel way to the way that the seasons evolve. I can tell you from my own personal experience that there are certain times of year, I'm a musician, and there are certain times of year where there's less work. There are certain times of year where there's more work. And that's built into the calendar. It's clear to see for me, during the Omer, there's less music being played. During the 3 weeks of mourning for the Beis Hamikdash, for the temple's destruction, there's less music being played. So that's something that directly affects me. I'm directly affected by the calendar itself. Now, there are other ways that I can make money as well, of course, with God's help. But the idea is that we are affected. We are affected on a level of guidance, or the way that Hashem sends His shefa, His influx into the world. It's affected through the sun and the moon in this way. Now, with this understanding, we see that there are those who are on a higher level, that because their connection to Hashem is constant, it's beyond the sun, it's beyond the moon, it's not affected by the seasons. Perhaps it's because they have a high level of bitachon, of trust in God. Their relationship is stalwart, it's rock solid. So therefore, that 1 in 100 are not affected by the seasons. They're not affected by the sun and the moon. But it's clear that where does the power come from? Even that which comes, so to speak, through the sun and the moon, through the cycles of the year, that shefa, it originates from Hashem, is what the Medrash is teaching us. Now this piece, number 9, in the Medrash finishes off with an enigmatic statement, which I believe holds the core of what's going on when it comes to the light that we're speaking about. It says like this: El mul pnei ha-menorah ya'iru shivas haneros. To the face of the menorah. Interesting, he uses the word face, and that's what the Medrash is going to come and explain. To the face of the candelabra shall the 7 candles shine. Amar David, King David said, and actually the Eitz Yosef says, it's a verse in Proverbs, so this is actually King Solomon. The verse says in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 15, Ba'or Pnei Melech Chaim. It speaks about the light of the face of the living king. Hashem, God, is the living king, and we get lit up from the face, so to speak, of God, the living king. What does that mean? What is the idea? Clearly, the Medrash is showing us that there's a light which shines from God, which shines from His face, so to speak, which we also see the face of the menorah, the face of the candelabra shining as well. Now, the word face is very interesting because the word in Hebrew is panim. Panim means a face, but it also the same letters can mean pnim, which means the inner aspect. The face is the superficial aspect. It's what we see on the outside of the person. The pnim, the inner aspect, is that which we don't see in an ideal world. So a person who is toicha kibara, his inside is the same as his outside. So that face, the face that you see, the face that he shows the world, should reflect that which is inside of him. It's also possible to look at a person's face and have an intuitive understanding of who that person is without even speaking to them, without really meeting them. But you can see on a person's face who they are. It reflects something internal. It reflects who they are, how they hold themselves, how they see the world, how they plan on interacting with you. So we need to understand what is the idea of the face of Hashem, the face of God, which is shining into us. And I'll just read the ending here. Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yossi, Nimnas hasimcha min harashaim, v'nitn li Yisrael. Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yossi says that joy was prevented from those who were evil, and rather was given to the people of Israel. Shehutzrach HaKadosh Baruch Hu leishev in basar v'dam baner. God needed to sit with flesh and blood, with human beings, with a candle. This candle is how Hashem sits with us, so to speak. She'amar lahem al mul penei ha-menorah ye'iru. That God said to us that towards the face of the menorah shall there be light. So God sits with us somehow through this ner, through this candelabra, and that's where we have joy. So we need to understand a few things here. One is the Pnei Melech Chaim. What is the idea of God's face, which is shining upon us? What is the idea of the joy which was given to the people of Israel? Why does it come through the ner, through the candle, through the candelabra? So hold on to these questions. And I'd like to share with you the next idea of the next piece in the Medrash. It's in subsection Yud, number 10. I'm not going to read it inside, but the Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded to create the candelabra, to create the menorah, so Hashem showed him exactly how it was to be made. And then Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses came down from Mount Sinai. He forgot. He didn't remember. He went back up. Hashem showed him again. He learned it. He understood it. He saw that picture. He came down. He forgot again. He kept going back down, back up, forgetting it. What does he do? So he says, Hashem, I can't remember it. What should I do? Hashem says, go to Bezalel. Bezalel is going to make it. Indeed, Moshe goes to Bezalel, and Moshe doesn't give him any instructions. Bezalel just makes it on his own, exactly as Hashem had showed Moshe Rabbeinu. Exactly as Moses had seen it. Bezalel, miraculously it seems, is able to create exactly the menorah that Hashem wants to be created. Moses is startled. How could it be? Hashem showed me exactly how it's supposed to be done, but I couldn't do it. I kept forgetting. And you didn't even see it even once, but you did it on your own. And so he finishes off by saying, your name is Bezalel. Bezalel means Betzel Kel, in the shadow of God. You were standing there in the shadows, so to speak, when Hashem showed me how to do it. And this we need to understand. What does it mean? Was Bezalel up there in the heavens on Mount Sinai standing next to Moses when Moses was being instructed about the menorah? That's not true. No one was allowed to come up there with him. So what does it mean that Bezalel was standing in the shadows when Hashem showed Moshe how to create the menorah? And also I want to understand, how is it that this idea connects to the light that we were speaking about in the previous conversation, the light that's shining through the sun, the moon, shining for the tzaddikim, the righteous ones directly. How is this connected? So again, let's hold on to these questions, and let's see the next part of the Medrash. It says in subsection Yud Aleph, number 11. It speaks about the Levim, it speaks about the Levites, and it speaks about the fact that there were 7 strings upon the instruments that were used by the Levites in the tabernacle and in the temple. Brings a proof to this from the verses, and it says that in the times of Mashiach, when the Messiah arrives, we're going to have 8 strings upon these instruments. And la'asid lava, in the future time, in the world to come, we're going to have 10 strings on these instruments. And my question is, what is the significance of the 7 strings, the 8 strings, the 10 strings? Okay, maybe it's a little bit of a harder instrument to play. A guitar has 6 strings, and that represents a certain level of difficulty. 7, 8, 10. What is the difference? What's the idea or the depth behind this piece in the Medrash? And also, again, how does it connect to what we're speaking about, which is the concept of the light of Hashem, which is flowing through the menorah, through the candelabra? Also, this part I want to read inside the Medrash. It ends off by saying that how was the music established in the temple? Umi hiskin lahem Shmuel v'David. The prophet Samuel and King David, they were the ones who established the music. Shnamar, as the verse says, it's in Divrei Hayamim, in the First Chronicles, chapter 9, verse 22. Hema yisad David u'Shmuel haroya be'emunasam. This was established by King David and Samuel, who saw it with their faith. Now, what's interesting, it also says, V'heim hamidu chalukei hashir. When it came to deciding who would be the one to play this instrument, who would play that instrument, so that was also decided there. And the Levites would stand upon a platform, and they would sing in front of Hashem, God, who spoke and the world came into being. So I want to point out, it's very interesting that we're talking about who established it. The prophet Samuel, King David. They were the ones who were able to establish the music, and they were also the ones who were able to establish who would be playing which instrument, assigning each person his special task, and then they would all sing in front of Hashem. We need to understand the depth of what this is saying. Now the Medrash finishes off with another idea which leads into the next piece in the Medrash, which I also want to share with you. Very interesting. See the love that Hashem had for the Levites. This is what God said to Moses. The Levites are so beloved to me. I want you to take them for my name, in honor of my name. I want you to bring them to be high, to be great, to have a position of leadership. Minayin, how do we see this? We see this from the fact that the verse says, take the Levites. Taking them means that we're separating them, we're placing them in a different category, in a different place, in a higher place, that they have a leadership status. They stand upon that ducha, they stand on that platform singing the songs of God, represents the fact that they're elevated in a certain way. What is the idea of this elevation? What is the idea of this leadership? What is the idea of this love that's being expressed here for the Levites? So that's the lead into the next session of the Medrash. And the next session speaks about the fact that why indeed, or how was it that the Levites merited to have a higher level, to be raised up above the other people of the Jewish people. And the Medrash goes through a few different examples of certain righteous individuals who were chosen by God to have a certain level of sorora, of leadership. And how did that come about? It came about through their nisyonos. It came about through their challenges, through the difficulties that they went through. The first example of it is Avram Avinu, Abraham. So he had all of these different tests. He had 10 different tests before he became the great person that he became. And interestingly, the Medrash refers to the fact that after these tests, he was blessed. There was a blessing that came upon him. Usually when we think about a blessing, we think it means that good things come into their life. But the Medrash is clearly saying that the blessing was that that person was elevated to a level of sorora, of leadership. So Abraham experienced that, Isaac experienced that, Jacob experienced that, Joseph is somebody who went through nisyonis. He went through those challenges with Potiphar's wife, and then having to be in jail for 12 years. After that, what happens to him? He becomes the great leader over Egypt, second in command only to Pharaoh. So we see that greatness is accomplished. Greatness, in order for a person to achieve that greatness, it's through their nisyonis. It's as a result of the challenges that they overcome. And the Medrash speaks about the fact that the Levites also had a certain challenge, which I don't want to get into in detail, but they also encountered a certain challenge at Mount Sinai when the Jewish people sinned with the egel, with the golden calf. And as a result of that challenge which they passed, so they were raised up to a greater level, and they reached that sorora, that leadership, which they were capable of. Now the thing that stood out for me as I read this part of the Medrash is the contrast between what the Medrash said earlier in regards to Bezalel, as opposed to what we see is true in regards to the Levium, the Levites, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Yosef. We see over here that in order for them to reach their greatness, to accomplish, to become who they are, to accomplish that which they were meant to accomplish in the world, they needed to first undergo nisyonos, challenges, difficulties. But when it came to Bezalel, we see that he was somehow able to tap into who he was meant to be, to tap into his greatness, to manifest in the world that which he was meant to manifest, even without undergoing any great challenges or difficulties. Bezalel was a young person. He was 12 or 13 years old, as per our Chazal, as the sages tell us. And he was able to manifest in the world something that even Moshe Rabbeinu, at the age of 80, after so many spiritual experiences, after so much that he had invested in his relationship, trying to understand, how do I make this menorah? He was not able to do it. But Bezalel, without too much effort it seems, he just did it. He was just there in the shadow of God, so to speak. So I want to understand, what is the contrast, the difference between Bezalel as opposed to these other great people who were able to manifest who they were and become that great person, that leader, only after great challenges. So in order to understand all that's going on in these different midrashim, I'd like to look at a concept which we find in the Gemara, in the Talmud, which is that when a baby is inside of its mother, when a child is, the fetus, is inside of the mother and is growing and developing, so our Chazal tell us, our sages tell us, that that child is in a place, in a spiritual way, where it's being taught by a malach, it's being taught by an angel, the Torah, the spiritual teachings of the Torah, and there's a light above its head, there's a ner daluk, it says, our sages say, there is a candle which is lit above its head, and through that candle, the child is able to see misofa olam vad sofa, from one end of the earth to the other. Now, what is this ner daluk? What is this light, this candle which is above the person's head? So it's clear from Chazal, it's clear from our sages, that this is actually referring to the spiritual aspect of the human being, to the neshama, the soul, which corresponds to the area which is above the head, the soul, the lower aspects of the soul, as the Nefesh HaChaim talks about, Reb Chaim Volozhin, the lowest aspects of the soul, the higher aspects extend up into the spiritual realms, but the lowest aspect of the soul is actually inside of the moch, it's inside of the brain, and it animates the human being, it animates the person, gives them life. That soul is the ner, it's the candle, which is daluk, which is lit. And that soul is not just something that animates the human being, but it's actually that which guides the fetus, the physical part of the fetus, as per the Ramchal, which speaks about this, that it guides the construction of the body. Now, that information, which is the construction of the body, is also representative of the Torah, which is learned by the child, the fetus, so to speak, which really is a representation of that which that unique person, the Torah, his chelik in Torah, his portion in God's plan. It's that which he's supposed to accomplish in the world. Our Chazal speak about it, that the child forgets that which he has learned as he comes out, because it's driven deep into his subconscious. He needs to discover what is his purpose in the world. But when we speak about the ner, which is what we're talking about here, when we speak about the spiritual light, it's actually the essence of who that person is. That's why we start off the whole conversation with Shalach orcha v'amitcha hema yanchuni. The Jewish people are asking God, send me your light and your truth, they shall guide me. We're speaking about the light of guidance, the light where we understand what our spiritual purpose is in this world. Now, that's something which also potentially can be cyclic. It can be dependent on the sun and the moon. The light of guidance can come in that way as well. We can see as we go through our lives, as we experience the cycles spiritually, physically, everything parallels. And we can see that that's Hashem guiding us through those lights, through those cycles. But there are also special individuals, great tzaddikim, righteous individuals, who have direct access to that light. They know exactly who they are. And that's the Or Pnei Melech Chaim, the face of Hashem. What is the face of Hashem? It's, as we said, it's the Pnim and the Panim. It's the inner aspect and the outer aspect. It's who we are. Our face shines out who we are, who we're meant to be, what we're meant to accomplish. The inner aspect of ourselves is shining out. And it's really the face of Hashem. God shines through each and every one of us. God has a special light that He wants each of us to shine. His light. We each have our own shade of light that we're meant to bring into the world. And that's what these midrashim are speaking about. And there's a special joy that comes with that light. That joy is taken away from the Rishonim. Those who deny their purpose, who are not acting in consonance with God's will, they lose that joy, the joy of life, the joy of truly reflecting and being who that person is meant to be. That joy is given to those who sit with God, who receive the candle. The ner that we're speaking about, the candle here, is the candle of our souls, of our individual purpose, of the light that Hashem wants each of us to shine out. And Hashem sits with us, so to speak. God is with us, guiding us, showing us how to manifest His light in the world, each and every one of us. Now, there's two different ways that a person can access that light and find out who they really are. And that, I believe, is what's being expressed in the Medrash, and speaking about Bezalel, and then speaking about other great tzaddikim who also were able to manifest who they were. Some people have that unique ability to just be who they are, and that's it. They just, it's almost a childlike capacity to just manifest and be who they are. There's no shtick, there's no tricks, there's no superficiality. A Bezalel is a child. He's a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old. He's just being who he is. Moshe Rabbeinu, he's 80 years old. There's so much. Of course, there's greatness, incredible greatness, the most humble of all people in the world. But still, it's not his purpose to create the menorah. It's Bezalel's purpose. It's Bezalel's unique song, so to speak, that he's meant to sing. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is needed to bring down that song. He goes back and forth, up and down. He forgets it. And Bezalel somehow, because of Moshe, and I believe that's the depth of what the Medrash is saying, because Moshe tried to access it, Bezalel was able to access it. He was able. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Neshama Kolelos. He includes everybody. But Bezalel just has it it just happens on its own because of that childlike simplicity. He's not trying to figure it out. It just happens. That's the midah of a Bezalel. He's in the shadow of God. He's able to just manifest that. And there are others who their path is that in order to get to the essence of who they are, they need to have that revealed through challenges. And that's Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And that's the Levites themselves. And that's Yosef HaTzadik, it's Joseph. But the point is that they're getting to the essence. They're revealing the light that we're speaking about here. That light which is their soul, which is their access point to Hashem's light, the light that Hashem wants to shine into the world through them. And I think that this offers us a very interesting insight into the numbers here, the different strings. What's this different string amounts when it comes to the tabernacle? It was 7. When the Messiah comes, there'll be 8. There'll be 10 in the future time, in the Olam Haba. Each of these different string numbers represent different significant numbers in Kabbalah, in the deeper aspects of the Torah. 7 is Teva. 7 is the natural world which we live in now. 8 is a deeper level. It's Lamala Min HaTeva. It's above nature. It's that realm that we inhabit when we come back to the times of Mashiach. We come back to the way it was Adam HaRishon Kodem HaChet, the first man before the sin. And an even deeper level is attained when we get to Olam Haba, to that world to come, which is the 10th level, which is the deepest level of going back to the source. But the idea is, and it's an amazing idea, that the music itself reflects where we are. Everything, every aspect really of reality reflects that. But music is something which has an amazing power to reflect the depth of spirituality and the depth of the place where we are. The reality itself is reflected in the music. And it was the Levites who would play that music because they were the ones who had developed in their relationship with Hashem. They had overcome those challenges. They had found the light of Hashem within them. And thus the music that they were singing, the music that they were playing, was truly a reflection of the light of Hashem. And who was it that gave them or directed them to the music, what songs there are to sing? And who was it that told them which Levite is supposed to play which instrument, which means who are you at your essence? What is your unique role and goal and place? It was these tzaddikim, Samuel, King David, who had an even deeper and more direct access. They were that 1 in 100 who had access to the light of Hashem's face, so to speak. So I want to bless you, and please bless me. Hashem should help us. We should be able to access that light. And if we can't access it ourselves, Hashem should help us to find those who do have access to it and get guidance from those people. And Hashem should help us to be able to choose, hopefully, the childlike ability that Bezalel had, but if not that, then to be able to choose to overcome the obstacles, the difficulties, the challenges which Hashem brings to us so that we can uncover the light of who we really are and thus rise to the greatness that Hashem has in store for each and every one of us. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.